Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the most profound and, frankly, fascinating philosophical puzzles out there. It's the kind of question that literally keeps scholars, skeptics, and believers up at night. I mean, think about it. If God is real, and if God actually wants a relationship with us, why isn't his existence completely, undeniably obvious to everyone? Why is he hidden? It's a remarkably simple question, right? But man, it sparks a massive debate. Think of this explainer as a heavyweight intellectual boxing match. We've got some of the world's top philosophers of religion stepping into the ring to try and solve an ultimate epistemological mystery. In one corner, you have arguments claiming this hiddenness is proof that God probably doesn't exist. And in the other, we have these incredibly intricate defenses explaining exactly why a divine being must, by necessity, stay in the shadows. All right, so let's look at the roadmap for the match. We're going to cover 1, the divine hiddenness problem, 2, belief versus personal transformation, 3, free will and ultimate threats, 4, the moral ignorance counterargument, and finally 5, the natural law defense. So round 1, the divine hiddenness problem, an epistemological puzzle. To pin down the exact nature of this problem, we look to philosophers like Peter von Inwagen and Dr. Jim Spiegel. As Spiegel highlights, this specific issue has gained massive traction over the last few decades. Scholars like Schellenberg have really pushed it to the forefront. And right off the bat, we need to clarify something absolutely crucial. This is completely distinct from the classic problem of evil. The problem of evil asks why a good God allows suffering, but the problem of divine hiddenness, that is a purely epistemological puzzle. It's strictly about knowledge, evidence, and what we can reasonably know. To really hammer this home, Van Inwagen asks us to imagine a massive what-if scenario. Picture a world with absolutely zero suffering, no moral evils, no crimes, no stealing, no lying, and let's add to that, no physical illnesses at all, no cancers, no injuries, just perfect, flawless health. Well, even in that totally perfect, painless utopian universe, the problem of divine hiddenness would still exist, because even in that world, people could just look around and say, okay, sure, this place is great, but where is God? I still don't see any clear evidence. It's entirely about the lack of obvious signs. Let's trace Van Inwagen's logic step by step here. 1, if God exists, that would be a highly important thing for us humans to know. 2, a capable God could easily provide clear signs of his existence. 3, therefore, if he existed, he would totally provide those signs. 4, however, no such unmistakable signs exist. And 5, the conclusion, therefore, there's a rational reason to doubt that God actually exists. It's a tight, logical sequence for sure. So how exactly do defenders of theism counter this? Moving to round 2, belief versus personal transformation, the first defense. Theists parry this logic by asking us to take a step back and really deeply consider what God's actual goal for humanity might be, assuming he exists, of course. Van Inwagen points out that God supposedly doesn't just want us to know he's there. He cares deeply about how and why we believe. If God just wanted us to acknowledge his existence, he could, put giant fiery messages in the sky every day. But undeniable miracles like that would only force what philosophers call bare belief. You believe in God the same way you believe in gravity, because you literally have to. But theism suggests God is actually interested in deep, significant personal transformation. And hiddenness makes that kind of willing relational transformation possible. All right, round 3, free will and ultimate threats, Murray's theodicy. Enter scholar Michael Murray, who steps into the ring with a really fascinating free will theodicy. He takes this concept of transformation and applies it to the psychology of threats. Murray asks, what is actually necessary for human free will? Well, for us to truly, freely choose a relationship with God, we can't be compelled. We can't be forced into it by an overwhelming, terrifying threat, like the threat of ultimate punishment or hell. So God has to adjust what Murray calls threat significance. And this relies on 3 distinct variables: threat strength, threat imminence, and the wantness of the threatened, which basically just means how much a person actually cares about their own well-being. Now, since the strength of eternal damnation is absolute, you literally can't get a stronger threat than that. And since humans naturally care about their own well-being, God can't really adjust the strength or the wantonness. So he has to adjust the imminence. Murray breaks threat imminence down into 3 subtypes: probabilistic, how likely is the consequence; temporal, how soon will it happen; and epistemic, how clear and unambiguous is the threat itself. So here is the real kicker. God chooses to adjust epistemic threat imminence. According to Murray, God purposefully creates epistemic ambiguity by hiding himself.
By making his existence somewhat ambiguous, he significantly reduces the psychological compulsion of the ultimate threat. He dials back the terror just enough so that you aren't forced to follow him out of sheer panic. You're given the breathing room to actually exercise genuine free will. Actually, it mirrors the choices we navigate every single day, right? The less immediate and overpowering the pressure, the more authentic the decision we end up making. And what I find absolutely fascinating is how this very modern philosophical variable maps perfectly onto ancient texts. As the prophet Isaiah wrote thousands of years ago, "Surely you are a God who hides himself." Murray is arguing here that this hiddenness isn't a mistake. It's a vital, intentional feature of the universe, designed specifically to protect human freedom. But hold on, round 4, the moral ignorance counterargument, Lovering strikes back. Because the match is far from over. We pivot now to a scholar named Lovering, who completely flips Murray's free will defense on its head. Lovering says, okay, sure, compulsion ruins moral character. I'll give you that. But there's another way to destroy moral character, and that is through inculpable ignorance. This means being ignorant about what is right and wrong, but in a way that isn't actually your fault. Lovering poses a really harsh critique here. How can you freely choose to do good if God's hiddenness leaves you completely in the dark about what good even is? Lovering's logic presents a massive danger for the theist. If God is hidden, he argues that a lot of people will justifiably give up belief in God altogether. And if they do that, they might become moral nihilists, meaning they believe there's no actual objective right or wrong. And think about it. If you don't believe any action is truly good, you can never even form the intention to do a good action. And without the intention to do good, moral development is literally impossible. So Lovering sees this as an inescapable logical trap for the believer. If God shows up with undeniable proof, we're coerced by the threat of hell, which destroys our freedom to develop moral character. But on the flip side, if God hides, we become inculpably ignorant and fall into moral nihilism, which also destroys our ability to develop moral character. Therefore, Lovering argues the whole system just contradicts itself, providing a highly rational, compelling argument for atheism. Which brings us to round 5, the natural law defense, the final rebuttal. It looks like a knockout blow from Lovering, doesn't it? But we're going to return the serve one last time by exploring a really powerful rebuttal to Lovering's claim that divine hiddenness inevitably destroys our moral knowledge. And this introduces the concept of natural law. This is the idea that a basic, intuitive understanding of right and wrong is fundamentally woven straight into human nature. It's essentially the Achilles heel of Lovering's argument. Natural law suggests that human beings absolutely do not need undeniable miracles or even a written holy book to understand basic morality. You don't need a fiery message in the sky to figure out that stealing or murder is wrong. The defense basically argues that God could easily build an innate awareness of moral truth, a conscience, directly into our cognitive operating system. And this brilliantly resolves the trap. God can remain epistemically hidden, thus preserving our free will and protecting us from the coercion of his overwhelming presence, while simultaneously ensuring we aren't morally ignorant. Why? Because the baseline for goodness is already written on our hearts. We maintain our freedom, but we still know enough to be held morally accountable for the everyday choices we make. Man, this back and forth is exactly what makes philosophy so exhilarating. We've gone from questioning why a perfect universe would still lack clear signs of God to dissecting the psychology of threats, all the way down to the innate programming of the human conscience. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If absolute certainty was handed to you on a silver platter, would it actually elevate you, or would it simply force your hand? Does undeniable proof actually destroy our freedom to be truly good? Thank you so much for exploring this with me on The Explainer. Until next time, keep questioning.